Final budget hearing of the School Board of Palm Beach County to order at 5:05 p.m. This final public hearing regarding the 2020-2021 district budget is called to order for the purpose of to listen to the public regarding the superintendent's proposed budget and millage rates. This is not our first meeting relative to this budget. We've held 5 board workshops on the budget beginning in December 2019 and conducted a public hearing in July. The agenda for this meeting includes adoption of the proposed millage levies and approval of the district budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. Are there any speakers who wish to address these items? Ms. Bass?
There are no speakers signed up for this meeting.
Thank you. I'll now turn the meeting over to Dr. Fenoy, who will provide a brief overview of the district's 2020-2021 budget. Dr. Fenoy?
Mr. Chairman, before you are Mr. Chairman and Board, there are 2 agenda items that I am recommending for the millage levies and 2020-2021 district budget. These items are brought forward to comply with truth in millage legislation. Mr. Burke will present the 2020-2021 budget.
Good evening. Final budget adoption is always an important milestone. It represents the culmination of months of work to get to develop a balanced budget recommendation. We have a 3.8 billion total budget, and Ms. Knust and her team have done a really nice job producing an impressive 344-page budget book. This year, the difference is this year, normally when the board approves a budget, there's a sense of finality, and you set our course basically for the school year financially. And I'm very concerned that this year is going to be a little different with everything else that's changed because of COVID-19 and the pandemic. I'm very concerned that we'll be forced to revisit this budget during the course of the year. We've been proactive in trying to prepare for this scenario. The superintendent led us through department budget reductions in the spring, and we've achieved $17 million in total savings through those budget reductions. Through this budget process, we've built a reserve of $42 million to help mitigate the potential mid-year budget shortfall that we're expecting at the state level. And so I feel like we've done what we can, but in reality, it may not be enough. I shared on August 26th, we had the first updated economic outlook for the state that showed for this year they were expected to be down about $3.4 billion. These recessions, governments may not be the first agencies to get hit in a recession, but we're a little downstream, and it's unavoidable that the impact to the sales tax revenues around our state are going to catch up with us. So I just wanted to kind of caution the board that this is probably not the last you'll see of the FY21 budget. I'm calling this the boomerang budget because after the board approves it tonight, we will transmit it to FDOE, and then we're going to wait for it to come flying back at us mid-year with less revenue. So we'll deal with that when the time comes. On Thursday, there's going to be an important meeting. It'll be the first meeting at the state level of the joint House and Senate Legislative Budget Commission. And they're going to be reviewing that same report I kind of previewed on August 26th and starting to talk about the potential loss in state revenue, how they may use CARES Act dollars, and, if, maybe start to mention the possibility of a special session. Everything we've heard is that we would probably not see a special session until after the elections and the legislature has a chance to reorganize in November. But all the signs are pointing to the greater likelihood of that happening at some point. So that's kind of the bad news. I hate to rain on the parade of final budget adoption. It's an event that's steeped in pageantry and tradition. We've canceled any post-celebratory events, and we're just going to get down to basics here and take you through the presentation tonight. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Knust, and we'll run you through our presentation.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So the purpose of the meeting today is to approve the final millage rates as well as the budget. A lot of what you see here is going to be repetitive to what was presented during tentative adoption because it's very prescriptive of what we need to present not only to the board but to the public. We always start with the property values because the millage rate is applied to the property values. So the school taxable value actually increased 5% from FY20 to FY21 because those school taxable values are based on values as of January. We don't know what it's going to look like for FY22, but at least for FY21, those values are holding a slight increase and holding constant. So when looking at the millage rate that the board will be approving today, it's a slight decrease from the prior year. So it's 7.01. And the majority of the millage rate is actually set by the state legislature. And so that's the RLE. The other components are capped by Florida statute. So the board does have some really limited authority over the millage rate and the millage rate that is actually set and that you're required to approve today. So looking at the millage rate, even though it's a decrease from the prior year, it's actually a 1.5% increase over the rollback rate. The rollback rate is the millage rate that would be applied to that new higher taxable value to generate the same amount of revenue that was generated in FY20. So what does that mean to an average homeowner? So an average homeowner with a property value, a taxable value of $200,000, assuming no increase in assessed value, will see a decrease in their property values, a decrease in their property taxes of $30.80. If they had a 3% increase in their assessed value, they'd actually see a slight increase of about $16 in their property tax bill. So the total budget is $3.8 billion. There were some very minor changes from what was presented in tentative adoption. One of the ones that I will highlight was the CARES Act. I mentioned during tentative adoption, we did not have the final approval from the Florida Department of Education, so it was not included in the budget. We have since received the final notification, so it is included as a separate line item. You can see there at $39.9 million. So the good news is the budget is balanced. But but this is going to be a very challenging year. We know we're going to have additional costs. We know it's very likely that we are going to have state funding reductions. So we were able to set aside a reserve of $42 million. That reserve was the result of the increase in the beginning fund balance, the savings that were generated in FY20 related to the implementation of the spending and hiring freeze, and just the general closure of facilities. You know, that combined with the department reorganizations that were done in FY21, we were able to set aside $42 million. But we know that we are going to have additional costs. This year is going to be more challenging than in prior years, where we're going to have to continue to monitor enrollment throughout the year. Because we are going to have fluctuations between, you know, starting in virtual and moving to brick and mortar, and what that's going to look like throughout the year. And we also know that we're going to be facing potential mid-year reductions from the Florida Department of Education. So we're going to continue to monitor that, as well as additional costs related to COVID-19. So as of right now, our additional costs related to COVID-19 is estimated at $50 million, and we do expect that to continue to increase. We continue to monitor additional revenue streams that we're going to be able to tap in addition to the reserve that we set aside. So going back to the budget calendar, we had tentative adoption was July 29th. We had the capital plan workshop on the 26th. And so now we're at final budget adoption. Although, as Mr. Burke noted, you know, it's not necessarily that meaning that this budget is going to be final.
So thank you, Ms. Knust. Just want to touch a little bit more on the enrollment. We are concerned about enrollment, and Palm Beach is not alone in that. I'm hearing it across the state. It just seems like, you know, we're low in the kindergarten grade level, where families may just be keeping their kids home. You know, home education is becoming more popular. So it's almost too early for us to really tell exactly where enrollment's going to land. I think with us opening up brick and mortar on the 21st, that may have an impact. But I am concerned that the enrollment is going to decline significantly, and that's could add to our budget troubles. The state has said, you know, that they're going to try to hold us harmless for the first semester with the October FTE count. But they've been really short on detail as to how that's going to work. So I was on a call today with the state finance officers, and there's kind of a growing concern that, you know, we've taken them at their word that they're going to try to hold us harmless, but we'd feel better if they would provide the guidance and exactly how that process will work, because there's a lot of intricacies and kind of little nuances. So enrollment's just, unfortunately, it's another kind of piece of bad news. That just puts additional strain on the budget. We'll work through that. We'll keep the board apprised, and we're going to make the best of it. I think we've done everything we can to prepare and put the budget together, and now we're just going to have to work through the school year and see what the future brings. So we'll open up for any questions at this point, Dr. Fenoy.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I turn it over to the board for any questions.
Mrs. Whitfield?
I just actually had a question about enrollment, because that did bring something up. Are we doing the 11-day count actually 11 days after we start, which would be soon, or when is that count actually happening this time?
No, we decided to push that count back a little bit. With this return to brick and mortar on September 21st, there's a good chance that would have a significant impact. And we don't want to, the 11-day count's a local thing that we do in Palm Beach County. Some districts do a 10-day or 20-day. We're probably looking more at like a 20-day. But we're kind of revamping that process to allow some more time for enrollment to stabilize. Now, the October FT week is October 5th through October 9th. And that's what the state's going to force us to report on. And then we're going to see if they truly hold us harmless or not. But we are kind of revamping that process a little bit because right now it just seems like our enrollment's not stable enough.
Thank you.
Mike, let me ask you a question if I can. So you've seen the emails as well as all of us from teachers saying that we've decided that we're going to give the teachers that didn't get the state money 0% increase. Can you I realize, your concerns about the budget being impacted, but what are we doing for the teachers that didn't get the increase to the 47.6 or whatever they were off to? What is the plan at this point?
Yes. So we have not started bargaining yet. We haven't had an official bargaining session yet with our teachers, but from a budget perspective, we have had some early conversations with the CTA leadership, and we've been very upfront about what's in the budget and what's not in the budget. The state provided over $30 million to our district this year to primarily increase the starting teacher salary. And with a goal of, you have to use 80% of that money to get your starting salary to $47,500. And the state's very specific, and they're only interested in classroom teachers under their statutory definition, which would leave a lot of our, people that we consider teachers, and they're in part of the teaching bargaining unit, like guidance counselors, media specialists, kind of leaves them out in the cold. So we've looked at, how far would this money go? The good thing for Palm Beach County is we're starting at 41,000. Many districts across the state are in the high 30s. So we don't have as far as to go to get to 47.5. So we can do that. We can get to 47,500. We can even pick up the teachers that are outside of the state's definition of classroom teacher. So we can keep everybody on one salary schedule, which I think is important. And then basically any money you have left, you can use, so 80% has to go to raising that starting salary. But if you get there and you have money left over, you can use that for the veteran teachers. And then you can use 20% of the money for veteran teachers. So based on the latest numbers we had, and this could fluctuate a little bit as our workforce changes, but we have basically enough money left over to guarantee all teachers, including the veterans, a minimum raise of 1.7%. And, I understand that's not great, but in these times, at least that's a cost of living adjustment, right? Maybe so you're not falling behind with your salary anyway. So we have to have those conversations with CTA and get the bargaining started. But yeah, the legislation that was passed, the intent was really to address the starting salary. We voiced those concerns, throughout the legislative session. We pointed out the pitfalls of not doing something more across the board that would benefit all teachers, but we're left with the law that was approved. That really, looking at the serious budget troubles that are ahead of us, we felt like that's the only salary money we should really be talking about. And everything else that we were able to save and put together, we put into that $42 million reserve to deal with the potential state cuts that are heading our way. If those don't materialize, if something miraculously happens and we're in a better financial shape, the board would have those monies available for other priorities. But I think we just need to be really upfront with our employees and recognize the hard times we're in and let them know what's possible and what's likely not possible.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burke. Mrs. Anders, then Ms. McQuinn.
Thank you, Mr. Burke and Heather, for your great work. And Mr. Burke, your leadership at the council, leading the finance committee is tremendous. But we know that we're going to need additional money from the feds. Congress is back in session now, and I know that they're looking at a pot of money. Have you made a budgeted list of how much more money we're going to need for PPEs, for the kinds of things that's going to have to keep us going throughout this COVID-19? So we have a pot of money that you've actually kind of talked about is what our needs are based on the money that may be coming from the federal government as we work with our senators and our House. I mean, do you have that kind of laid out as to how much you think? I mean, it's going to be an estimate. You think that we're going to need as we move through the whole year. We don't know where we're going to be with this. This is a new normal, and we may be in big trouble later. So have you put together how much more money you're going to need for the supplies and things to keep our schools going?
Yes, we've. I think the presentation spoke to. We've spent. If you look at everything we spent, it's about $50 million between the computers and the additional time for training. But when you get down to like the face coverings and PPE and stuff, then you're talking about more like $12 million. We are likely going to have to. Some of those things we're buying, we could burn through it fairly quickly and have to replenish. So we're mindful of that. There's some things that we've bought that should get us through the whole year. But at the federal level, and I have been involved with that work, the Council of Great City Schools recommended $200 billion for K-12 schools. And what's been approved to date was $13.5 billion. And what was last getting kicked around in DC was between 60 to 70 billion. So the council was taking the 200 billion, I think, took a longer range approach. Like, what's it really take to get us through this pandemic until there's a vaccine and things get better? And, you're talking about at least 2 years. If this last round of stimulus is it, 60 to 70 billion, I think that could save us for this school year we're in. I think that would probably shore up schools for this upcoming, for this current school year. And we could still run a little short in year 2. But, it just remains to be seen if we'll get any, if they can agree to something, between the House and the Senate and the President. We're going to have to just keep on top of this budget throughout the year and try to manage our costs and save money wherever possible. And we're just trying to be smart about things. But these are really trying times because, we're losing revenue on one hand and money is going out the door on the other, trying to mitigate the risk. So it's the most challenging budget I've ever been a part of.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Ms. McQuinn, and then Dr. Robinson.
I've thought hard about making this comment in terms of veteran teacher salaries, but I'm going to make it anyway because I want to emphasize to our veteran teachers that Palm Beach County, the board, the staff, the work that they put in the communities that they put into the referendum is an acknowledgement of how much we value our veteran teachers. So do our teachers make enough money? No, absolutely not. And again, the state continues, no matter what strides we make forward, they manage to put up a roadblock so that we have to work harder here in Palm Beach County. But I just want to remind you that we do support you very much. Remember that our veteran teachers, please help me know if I'm right, Mr. Burke, but $10,000 each year for 4 years. It isn't what you need. I just want you to remember that we really do recognize and value you very much. And Mr. Burke, I've been worried about you. I mentioned it to a couple of friends. Your jokes have been pretty lame for the last couple of board meetings. You're doing better tonight. So that is our celebration for your having a budget for this year. So glad to see your sense of humor is a little bit back.
Thank you. I appreciate your concern, and they're well-founded. All right, thanks.
Dr. Robinson, then Vice Chairman Shaw.
I really want to respond to that, but I'm going to hold back. Okay. So, but yeah, I share Mrs. McQuinn's viewpoint in terms of the value of teachers, and I actually said to the superintendent earlier, in like every domain, experience is so important, right? Including in teaching. So, yeah, we do individually and collectively value those experienced teachers, the ones that have the bunions from teaching, right? The experience under their belt. So I have a question and a comment. So the first is the cost of upgrading the air conditioning systems and the increase changing in the air conditioning filters. Was that included in? It wasn't in a bullet point. Was that included in that $50 million that I heard?
So that cost is actually included in our capital maintenance transfer for the filters. And no, I don't believe we swept that up into the 50 million. Ms. Canoes, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was well, maybe we did.
The air filters are included in there, okay. But any changes and upgrades to the HVAC system would be included in capital. But the air filters are considered more of like a custodial type cost.
So I think somewhere down the road, as we talk about the financial impact of trying to operate and survive in this pandemic, I think like all those things should be, from even though they're different funding streams, should be included in the cost of doing business during a pandemic, right? The comment I want to make, and I think this is actually to the superintendent. So we're hearing about these potential mid-year reductions, and we know that we have students, many of whom were already behind, who suffer from the spring COVID-19 slide, then the summer slide, and now the COVID slide 2.0, right? And we have some very skilled people in our district, just a few, we need more, that write grants. My request is that we realize that at some point in time, we are going to get through this, and we'll be on the other side of this pandemic and have children who are even further behind. And so I think that we need to ask our grants people to look long and hard for large and small pots of money that we can use to fund the academic acceleration efforts that we're going to need to have in place on the other side. Because what I don't want to do is to get on the other side of this pandemic, see those widening gaps and say, yeah, but we don't have any money. We know it's coming. Let's get ahead of it, please.
So Dr. Robinson, not only will I take that, I know staff is listening. Two things I would say to this. I'll sit with the deputy superintendent and Glenda Sheffield, Dr. Sheffield. I think it's two parts. To start thinking about the plan for remediation. I think Mr. Shaw brought this up a while ago. I think all of you brought it up at some point. So what would that plan start to look like? Because I think we need that piece in order to apply for grants. Like you got to have the words together. So I think there's a couple of things that we could do. I'll make sure that the grant writers start looking to see what's out there now. And I think we all know more is coming, but I think it's a simultaneous. And I think we also need to be clear. The Chief of Staff's office and Kathy V have outlined our strategic planning process. And so I think all of those things have to come together to make sure that, because all of our resources are going to have to be aligned to whatever our strategic vision is as a board is moving forward. So I think once we get schools open, and I'm sure, I'm almost positive that Mr. Oswald and Dr. Sheffield are thinking about it. But let's start solidifying that so that we can give the grant writers some direction. But I think we probably need to do a couple of workshops on this, because I think it's going to be a multifaceted approach. It's not going to be, we're going to do this one thing. I think you have kids at every level. And there's a lot for us to consider. So I think we need to take that time to dig deep. But I thank you. That's a great suggestion. We need to start looking at that. Mike, do you agree?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Right.
Vice Chairman Shaw.
Thank you. Mr. Burke, since Mrs. McQuinn was giving you these accolades, I have to give you one. After I don't know how many years of complaining about the house that you show on your slides, I was very impressed with the house that you decided to put on your slides this year. It was very touching. So I'll let you explain the significance of that. But after that, two issues of potential additional costs. You know, I mentioned the issue of the needs for maybe additional custodial services in locker rooms when we talked about athletics. But I do have a concern of our capacity as a district, that in the event that we have incidents as in schools where we do lose custodians and we need outside sources, do we have any contracts in place at this point for outside custodial services that can come in on an as needed basis?
Yes, Mr. Shaw, we do. We've always had contracts for these kind of enhanced cleanings. Normally it was something that would come in like with a hurricane or storm, or there was flooding or something like that. But we've utilized those contracts to do some real enhanced cleaning when if there should be like an outbreak that requires a more intense cleaning. We also have a contract in place for temporary staff that we can try to augment our employee workforce if we just want to try to bring in some temporary custodians. But let me work with Ms. Paul to make sure we have enough in place.
Right, and my suggestion is
a third party really firm lined up to just take over the normal cleaning of schools. We basically have two things at our disposal: additional temp employees or these contracted cleanings, but they're pretty costly. When we outsource it, it's expensive, and it's not something that's really sustainable to do on a long-term basis.
And have we set aside
the house?
the
house.
Just one other one before you talk about the house. Have we budgeted anything to ramp up any testing if the district finds it necessary for us to do COVID testing?
Well, there's that $42 million reserve is where I would point to if we have to spend a lot of money on testing. We're looking at different options. You could potentially run it through our health insurance fund. One scenario was utilizing a vendor that was affiliated with United Healthcare, and the charge would hit our health fund. But that could lead to rising premiums or put our health fund in a little bit of we're fortunate right now. The health fund's in good shape. We've been able to keep our employer premiums flat for 8 years, which is almost unheard of. So that's where I would point to, either the health fund or that reserve, or trying to write a grant or get some outside help with that.
Yeah. If I may, Mr. Shaw and board, we've been working with the health department and the healthcare district. Matter of fact, I want to say the deputy superintendent and his team had a meeting today. So this is a constant conversation. Now, there is not yet a district in the state of Florida that is doing continuous testing. It does not exist yet. And a lot of it is because of the cost. I think Mr. Barbieri and I were in a meeting several weeks ago, and they were telling us that $5 a person, it would cost us close to $500,000 a week just to do that type of testing. So we're looking at other options, where maybe, insurance can be billed. There's obviously for all of our employees and staff that they can go to any of the county's testing facilities if necessary, your own personal doctors. But we are continuously exploring testing options. It's just, again, with labs and, I don't want to get into all the details, but we are working through that. And we actually may be working with Mike's team in purchasing to see if there might be a way to get someone to come in and do that work, or maybe multiple companies, because we're just so large. We're just so large. And so we are exploring those actively. I just want to put that out there, Mr. Shaw.
And Mr. Burke, any comment on the house?
So the house, I think Mr. Shaw had been giving us a hard time for a few years, and we had used a picture of one of our staff members' house, Ron, for many years. And after his chiding, we decided to take a picture of a house in his neighborhood, Mr. Shaw. So that's Mr. Shaw's next door neighbor, I think. We couldn't find one of Mr. Shaw's house. But anyway, I think it's a nice tribute to Mr. Shaw. Unfortunately, Mr. Shaw, this is your last budget hearing. So we wanted to really, I said there's a lot of pageantry around this event, and that's probably the most significant piece of it right there. So, thanks for noticing.
Mr. Chairman, can I move on?
No, sir. There's a couple people. I couldn't get my microphone turned on there for a minute. Ms. Brill and then Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. And so, as Mr. Burke said, this is a very unusual year for us with the budget. It's going to be very fluid. And with every comment from my colleagues, it makes me realize even more how different this year is and how much change we may anticipate. So I would like to ask the superintendent to provide us with periodic updates, at the very least by December, to just see where we are on track with the budget, if we've had any extra costs. I really would like us to be kept apprised. I don't want to make it a burden on you to report to us each meeting, but I do think we need to make sure that we keep our arms around it and that we know what's happening. So
yes, ma'am. Matter of fact, Mr. Burke and I meet regularly about this. This is, of all the things I deal with, this is the one that actually keeps me up at night. And I've been informed that in years past, I think those board members that were here either working or as board members, Mr. Burke had a financial update of the district. And so he's going to be reinstituting that. We talked about it today. So it won't just be for the board. What we could do is bring back maybe mini workshops for the board. But Mike's plan is for the entire district to understand on a continuous basis our financial situation.
And just as a follow-up, I certainly would like to know, keep an eye on those COVID costs and how they can be offset, because we don't know what we don't know. And until we open up brick and mortar, we really don't know. I mean, this is a new world for all of us. So I just would like to make sure that the board's kept apprised. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Whitfield.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say Mrs. McQuinn's comments were fabulous. She really just nailed it. And I feel very similarly that we are not doing a great job to pay people what they're worth. But I have to say that my fears are really, really strongly that we will have to get to a position of layoffs. And I am beyond terrified of that, not just for the impact it will have on our employees, but our community as a whole, being the largest employer in the county. I think that the impact could be so great for just this whole county. So I'm hopeful, and like Mrs. Brill said about updates, I was hopeful that we could get an update after the 11-day count, whatever that's going to be this year, what that actual impact is on the number of students who really have chosen to come back to the school district, and how many we have lost, and what that impact on the budget will be, because I do think I'm very, very concerned. I've been watching the homeschooling numbers. I've been watching, people leaving to go to private schools, and I know it's larger than it's ever been. So I want to see how that looks, and then what the true impact on the budget is as early as possible, because I think our employees need to understand the situation we're dealing with, and be as prepared as we can for what's coming down the pipe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitfield. Go ahead, Dr. Fenoy. I think that was it for this at this point.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Agenda item B1, are we ready for the vote? Okay. I recommend the school board adopt the resolution determining revenues and millages levied for fiscal year 2021. This resolution by the school board of Palm Beach County, Florida, levies a total millage rate of 7.010 mills, which raises $1,493,522,764 in local revenue. The millage is comprised of 3.755 mills for required local effort and 0.007 mills for prior period required local effort adjustment, 0.7480 mills for discretionary operating, 1.5 mills for local capital improvement, and 1 mill for additional operating funds. This millage is 1.52% more than the rollback rate. Mr. Chairman.
Need a motion? Motion by Dr. Robinson, seconded by Ms. Brill. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. B2, Mr. Superintendent?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I recommend the school board approve resolution B2 and adopt the final district summary budget in the amount of $3,822,756,506 for fiscal year 2021. This includes the district's organizational chart and school board statement of its organization and operation.
I'm sorry, that motion was made by, I don't know, Mr. Shaw, seconded by Mrs. Andrews, and Dr. Robinson wants to speak. No? You were just seconding the motion, whatever. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Superintendent, do you or Mr. Burke have anything else for this meeting?
I have nothing, Mr. Burke.
No, sir. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Again, I'm just amazed that you can balance a $3.8 billion budget down to the last dollar. So congratulations on a great job.
Thank you.
We need a motion to adjourn this meeting so we can start the special meeting. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by Mrs. Andrews. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.